this final session is meant to be a question and answer time. So if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
I have a question about karma. The karma is growing very fast. When you have a plant, a seed in the ground, you need sun and water to let it grow. What is it that makes karma grow? Which conditions make it grow so fast?
That's a good question. Let me think. My mind is a little bit blank right now. I feel like there are conditions, but what are they? What are those conditions? Does anyone remember? Do you remember? Huh? Yes, that's one way that karmic seeds are nourished. That's so karma can have different results. There's different results of our actions, and one of those results is a rebirth, like taking rebirth in a particular place, a particular situation. And for karma to be that strong that it causes a rebirth, then it has to be a complete karma, complete action. And a complete action has 4 parts to it. There's an object, an actual object that you do the action to. Like, for example, the karma of killing. So for the action of killing to be complete, there has to be an actual person or being that is killed. Somebody actually gets killed. Because, we sometimes fantasize. We may have fantasies about killing somebody, or have a dream about killing somebody, but there isn't anybody who's actually killed. So that wouldn't be a complete karma. So for the karma of killing to be complete, there has to be a victim, an actual being that's killed. And that's one of the 4 conditions. And the second one has to do with your mental state. You actually have to have the intention to kill, because sometimes it happens accidentally. Like you're driving your car and an animal or even a person is suddenly there in front and you can't stop and you kill them. But you didn't have the intention to kill. So that's not a complete act of killing. So a complete act of killing, there has to be the actual intention. I want to kill. I intend to kill. And there also has to be a negative motivation for killing, like one of the 3 poisons, either attachment or aversion or anger or ignorance. So killing out of attachment would be like hunters. Yeah, hunters, they go out in the forest, they kill animals because they want to eat their meat or they want to take their fur. Yeah, so there's attachment. Another reason for killing, the usual reason for killing is hatred. Right? People they hate somebody and they want to kill them. So that's often a motivation for killing. There's also killing that happens out of ignorance. For example, animal sacrifice. In some religions, they kill animals as an offering to their god. And they think this is a good thing to do, a virtuous thing to do. Killing an animal and offering the blood to their god. But it's not a good thing to do. So this is ignorance. So those are different aspects of the mind, the mental state involved in killing. And then the third aspect is it's called a performance, and this is you actually do something to kill. Because people sometimes think about killing, but they never do it. Yeah, they just fantasize, but they don't actually act out those fantasies. So if somebody thinks about killing, and then they actually carry it out. They do something. They shoot somebody with a gun, or they give them poison, or whatever, different ways that killing can happen. So you actually act out your thought to kill. And then the fourth part is the completion of the action, and that is that the other being dies. Sometimes people try to kill, but they don't. They miss, or they wound the person, but they don't actually die. So the act of killing only becomes complete when the victim actually dies as a result of what you did. So if an action, like that's just the example of killing, if all four of those parts are complete, then it's a complete act of killing. And that has the power, the strength to bring a whole rebirth, to cause a rebirth. And it would be an unfortunate rebirth because that's a negative action. So it's always possible to purify. You can do purification, and that will change the karma. It's difficult to completely purify, like completely get rid of it, but you can change the karma so that it becomes less heavy. There will be less suffering as a result, yeah. Or the result is delayed for a long time. So you can sort of minimize the karma, the karmic result that would come. But many people don't know how to purify, so they just do an action, and then that karma is there in their mind. And then, if it's a complete karma, it can be the cause for a rebirth. So at the end of that life, or at the end of some other life in the future, if that karma is nurtured or ripened, then it can cause a rebirth in an unfortunate realm in the next life. And so there's a whole explanation this is a really important teaching in Buddhism, of the 12 links of dependent origination. I don't know if you've heard about that, but it comes in the section of the middling scope, the intermediate level. And the Buddha explained these 12 links. It's an explanation of how rebirth actually happens. Yeah, how is it that rebirth actually happens? And I won't go through all 12 of them, but, well, let's see. Yeah, it's kind of a complicated explanation, but if you have the karma, if you've created the karma to take a rebirth, then for that karma to ripen and bring that result, then before death, you need to have two mental states, two mental factors that are called craving and grasping. So these are both forms of attachment. Craving there's different kinds of craving, but one is the craving to be reborn again. When we feel like one life is coming to an end, we don't want to die. We don't want to go out of existence. So there's this craving to have another life, another rebirth. It's just something that comes up kind of instinctively. So it's a kind of attachment. And then grasping is an even stronger form of that. And those two mental factors, craving and grasping, are like the nourishment, like the water for the seed, the karmic seed to take rebirth, that it ripens and becomes the cause for the next life. So that's that's how at the time of death, just before death, a karmic seed gets nourished, ripened, so that it becomes the cause for the next life. But then I think other factors, it would just make sense that during our life, if we, continue to have negative attitudes, afflictive attitudes, coming up in our mind, those also probably nourish. I haven't heard this actually explained, but it would just make sense that negative attitudes, afflictive attitudes like attachment and anger and so forth, those also probably have an effect on our karmic seeds so that they can ripen and then cause rebirth or other bad experiences. Because karma isn't only the cause for rebirth, but it's also the cause for other kinds of experiences that we have during our life. And I think that having afflictive attitudes and not controlling them, just letting ourselves have attachment and anger and, kind of letting those run wild in our mind, those probably also nourish or nurture karmic seeds. Yeah, I just can't recall hearing an actual explanation of that, but it would just seem to make sense to me. Have you heard any other?
The second law of karma, not explained, it's multiplying. Yeah, once done, it's multiplying.
Where's the microphone?
I said the second law of karma, that once action done, then the karma multiplies like an apple seed, which becoming an apple tree. But this is not so much explained.
Yeah, not really how that works. It's just a natural thing that, that karma multiplies. But I would think that, if you don't apply any countermeasures, if you don't try to oppose negative attitudes and your tendency to do negative actions, if you just let these tendencies kind of run wild, then that probably nourishes them. Whereas if you try to apply countermeasures, you try to do purification practices to purify your karma, you try to apply antidotes to your mental affliction. So you're trying to work on keeping your mind more positive rather than negative. Then I think that would decrease the likelihood of karma ripening and bringing its result. But if you don't do any of those things, if you just let your mind, like a lot of people, just whatever they feel like doing, they do it. then that probably increases the likelihood of karma ripening. But I don't remember any other specific explanations of that.
Well, maybe it's also because of usefulness or gewoontevorming. Ik weet niet wat dat is. Habituation.
Yeah.
Because of habituation is one of the things that come through the karma.
Yeah. I mean, there is an explanation in the Lamrim about afflictions, causes and conditions that nourish afflictions. There's a list of 6 of these, and that's really helpful. But that's more about afflictions, not so much karma. But maybe that also applies to karma. So the 6, these are called 6 factors that increase our afflictions or cause afflictions to arise in our mind. So the first factor is the imprint of an affliction. So, like a seed. So, just as we have karmic seeds, we also have seeds of afflictions, of like anger and attachment and so on, because we've experienced those many times in the past. We've had many experiences of anger, many experiences of attachment and jealousy and ignorance. So, lots and lots of those experiences in the past. And so, because of those past experiences, we have seeds of those afflictions in our mind. I think of it the same in nature. If you have a certain kind of tree growing, I don't know what are those big trees when you go across the road and there's a road down there, these really, really tall trees. You know what those are called? Oak. Okay, oak trees. So if you have an oak tree, then it drops these, it drops seeds, right? Acorns. And from them, other trees can grow. Okay, so most trees and plants are like that. They drop things in the ground that produce new trees, right? So it's similar with our afflictions. We have afflictions in our mind, and they sort of leave seeds in our mind for more of the same kind of affliction. So that's the first factor, is that we have already in our mind, from the time we're born, right from the beginning of our life, we have these seeds of afflictions in our mind. So a baby isn't born with a completely pure mind, but a baby is born with a mind full of these seeds of afflictions. And then that's the first factor. And the second factor is object. So there's always an object that triggers our afflictions. And so certain objects will trigger anger, other objects will trigger attachment, and others jealousy, and so on. So there's always some object that we see or perceive somehow, and then that acts like a trigger for an affliction to come up. Okay, so that's the second factor. And then the third factor, let's see if I remember all these. One is, I may not have them in the right order, but one is like social influence. We are easily influenced by other people, okay? We can see that easily. If you hang around with people who get angry a lot, you'll probably also get angry a lot, right? Or if you hang around with people who have a lot of attachment, a lot of desire, they're always talking about things they're attached to, then you'll probably also find yourself having that affliction. So yeah, we're influenced by other people, the people we spend time with, and also like our family, right? If we're born into a family and everyone's always arguing and fighting and yelling at each other, then we'll probably also behave that way. So we pick up, it's not blaming them, but it's just that they are influencing us so that our afflictions get triggered off. And then another factor is more like information that we take in. So if we watch certain TV programs, or we read certain books, magazines, listen to lectures, okay, there's all different ways that information can come into our mind that can also influence us. I think it's well known that if you watch violent movies and play violent video games, you're probably going to have a lot of violent thoughts, right? Yourself. So that isn't so much people, but more like sources of information from the internet, from media, and so on, news, and so on. Then another factor is habit. So if we get angry, and we get angry a second time, and then a third time, and then a fourth time, and so on. It becomes a habit, it becomes habitual. So the more we do it, the easier it becomes. Yeah, so it becomes like a habit to have that particular affliction. And then the last factor is, the term is inappropriate attention. I think of it as obsessive thinking. So this is we all know this. You fall in love with somebody, you have attraction to somebody, and you just can't stop thinking about them, right? Without any choice, your mind just keeps thinking about that person. And then you get it caught up in fantasies and, dreams and all kinds of things. And similar when we're angry at somebody, right? When we have a lot of anger at a person, then it's similar. Our mind just keeps thinking about that person again and again and again in an angry way. So this is that final factor, obsessive thinking. You just keep thinking again and again and again about our object of attachment or anger or whatever. And when we keep thinking in that way, it's sort of reinforcing the affliction. It's kind of increasing it, like adding fuel to the fire, making it stronger. So those are 6 different factors that influence our experience of afflictions, mental afflictions like anger, attachment, and so on. And this is really helpful to know about, because if we know about these different factors, we can work with them. For example, if there's a particular person that you have a lot of anger towards, and it's hard to control your anger, it's better to don't be around that person so much. Limit your exposure to that person. And likewise with attachment. Yeah, like if there's a person you're really, really attached to, or an object that you're really attached to, and you want to overcome that attachment, it's best to try to stay away as much as you can, because the more you expose yourself to that object, the more likely it is that the attachment will come up. And then also information. Yeah, if we understand how our mind is influenced by the media and other sources of information, then we can be careful about that, limit the amount of time we read news or watch movies or do social media, so that you don't have that additional nourishment of your afflictions. Does that make sense? So this is about afflictions, not so much about karmic seeds. So, but there's a connection between afflictions and karma, because the karma we create is the negative karma we create, bad karma we create, is always motivated by an affliction. So it starts off with an affliction, anger, attachment, jealousy, whatever, and then if that gets stronger, we don't manage it, then we might find ourselves acting it out and doing something. And so it's good to try to, avoid creating negative karma, but even more important is to work on our mind so that we can manage the afflictions and try not to let them get strong and take over our mind and then push us to act them out. Yeah, they said if we didn't have afflictions in our mind, we wouldn't create any bad karma. It's only because of them that bad karma happens. So they are the real culprit. The real source of our suffering is our mental afflictions.
Thank you so much for all the teachings this weekend. I had maybe it's a bit of a personal question, so please feel free not to answer, it's all good, but I was just really curious. Like after all those years of practicing Dharma and learning about the Dharma, what practice has been kind of like the main driver for the transformation of your own mind in your experience?
I don't know if I could just say one, if there's just one practice alone, but I think that, the whole teaching, like what we were looking at this morning, bodhicitta, that whole idea of becoming enlightened to help all living beings, generating love and compassion, that's something that really grabbed me right away when I first started learning the Dharma. I remember being in Dharamsala and going to the Tibetan library, and I actually volunteered to help at the library because they were producing books, and this was before computers, so we had to type things by hand manually. So I was asked to type a part of a manuscript that was going to be a book, and the part they gave me was about bodhicitta, the development of bodhicitta. And I remember just, as I was typing these words and just thinking, wow, this is amazing. The whole idea of helping all sentient beings. And I thought, I can't imagine anything better than that, anything more noble, more wonderful than that. And I thought, how could I possibly turn away from this and say, no, I don't want to do that. That's not for me. It was just like, it just really grabbed me. And even though I'm far from being an actual bodhisattva, but just that whole teaching on bodhicitta and all the different aspects of it is just so inspiring. And that's probably one of the main things that keeps me going. Because much of the other teachings in Buddhism are not so different from other religions, ethics and creating virtue, avoiding non-virtue. That's pretty universal. And also love and compassion are there in other religions, but nothing like bodhicitta. I mean, becoming enlightened, becoming a Buddha, and help all living beings. So, I would, if I had to pinpoint one thing that was most inspiring or helpful for me to keep me going, it's probably that.
Did that transform your mind then as well?
Well, I mean, my mind is definitely better than it was before. So, I have more altruism and love and compassion, and trying my best to help others as much as I can. It's also given meaning to my life. I really feel like, when I was a teenager and so on, I don't know, life didn't look so great. The world didn't look so great. And I feel like with bodhicitta, then your life becomes meaningful and you feel good waking up every morning and thinking, okay, I'm still here, I'm still alive, I can still do things to help others. So it gives you a reason to live, and and also seeing that you can help others, even in little ways, little ways that you can help others. Just helping somebody carry a bag that they're having trouble with, or somebody's lost and you can give them directions, or they need help and you can help them. So just even in little ways that you can help people, it's very satisfying and helps them, but also helps you to feel good about yourself. So, I just love these teachings, and I feel like I can never get enough of them. Reading them again and again, listening to them, talking about them, meditating on them. Yeah, it's really, really wonderful.
Thank you.
Psychologists believe that you should experience your anger in order to heal.
In order to what?
To heal.
To
heal.
Heal?
Heal,
Oh.
like resolve your issues.
Mm-hmm.
So there are certain exercises to really experience your anger.
Mm-hmm.
But these exercises create negative karma?
Yeah, this is a tricky question. I've heard of one teacher, a contemporary teacher, who says, you shouldn't allow yourself even a moment of anger. And I personally feel that's kind of extreme because if you like many people had bad experiences as children, and maybe they never had the opportunity to experience and express the feelings that they had, so they're sort of buried or bottled up. And that's not healthy, that's not helpful, because it's like, they're just being suppressed and denied. And that can lead to sickness as well, sickness, physical and mental sickness. So suppressing and bottling up anger is not helpful. Just exploding and acting out anger is also not helpful. Yeah, especially if you're acting it out in harmful ways, causing harm to others. That's not helpful. But I think there's a middle way between those two extremes where, if there is suppressed anger, denied anger, to be able to get in touch with that and experience that, like in therapy, I think a skilled therapist would be able to help you do this, or on your own through meditation, getting in touch with the feeling of anger and just experiencing it and understanding it. This is really important, to understand what that anger is all about, and do whatever healing needs to be done. Yeah. And then ideally get to the point where you're sort of beyond that. You're beyond feeling that anger. And ideally, if you can feel forgiveness, compassion for whoever harmed you, then that would be the ideal thing. So, I think there's some people who are both therapists, Western therapists, as well as Buddhist teachers and Buddhist practitioners. So I think they would understand this sort of process and would be able to help people to go through that. There was one nun in our community who had some really terrible experiences as a child, sexual abuse, even rape. And she went to see therapists and went through therapy, and she said sometimes she was just really screaming with her anger. But it seems like she needed to go through that to be able to get beyond it and let it go. So going through that process really helped her to heal and then move beyond that.
I don't know if to add something is useful from my training as a child therapist. Yeah, but just briefly, that anger is functional in a sense that you find your boundaries, and if your boundaries have been crossed, by people who you trust, then that creates mental illness and physical problems. So the anger is like the signal point where you have to rediscover your boundaries. It's not re-experiencing anger. Anger is not the goal, but the goal is to find your boundaries and be able to take care of yourself by discovering often your boundaries, and that goes with being allowed to experience the anger that you have had to suppress and thus lost your feeling of boundary. So
my question is about the question that we asked the Buddha and what we intend with bodhicitta to help all sentient beings to be freed from samsaric existence. But would that mean that every being, every animal has to be, every mind has to be reborn in a human body and find Buddhism and find a teacher? What is the end of samsara? But what does that actually mean?
Yeah, this is a good question. Yeah, it is like a huge job taking on this this responsibility to help all sentient beings become free of samsara. And so bodhisattvas need to develop a really big mind, a really vast mind, not a little narrow mind thinking, well, it has to happen within this amount of time and in this situation. But they have to have a very vast mind and be willing to spend however long it takes. Yeah, initially that's difficult for us, but it's something that bodhisattvas do along the way, is to not be concerned about any sort of time frame. But they even think no matter how long it takes, even if it takes millions and millions of years, it's okay. I am dedicated to this, and I will keep working on it. I will keep helping sentient beings however long it takes. And so they develop, it has to be developed, of course, not something that just comes naturally, but they develop what's called joyous effort, which is one of the 6 perfections. It's number 4, perfection number 4, joyous effort. So joyous effort is explained as taking joy in doing what is virtuous, being joyful to do what is virtuous, what is beneficial, never getting tired, never getting bored, never giving up, but just happy to keep going however long it takes. So this is an essential quality or attitude that bodhisattvas develop. And of course there's things that help them to do that, other factors that help them, such as they overcome self-centeredness, selfish attitude, because it's usually that says, I'm tired, I don't want to do this anymore, It's usually something to do with me, the ego. And so that's like an obstacle that they overcome and then of course developing so much love and compassion for others that they don't mind. It's kind of similar like parents, you know, when parents bring a child into the world, it's a lot of work. Yeah, it's a lot of work. I mean, I'm not speaking from my own experience, but just from what I've seen and heard. It's really hard work to bring a child into the world, especially in the beginning when the child is really small and helpless and you don't get a good night's sleep. It's like a 24-hour job taking care of a little baby. So yeah, you get tired and it's not easy, but they're happy to do it, usually. If they did choose to have that child, you know, they're happy to do this because they love their child. They have so much love for their child that they want to take care of the child. So it's kind of similar with bodhisattvas. They have so much love for sentient beings, love and compassion. They see all sentient beings like their children. And so they are happy to do whatever it takes to help them. So I think that that's how bodhisattvas think and feel and get energy to keep going, keep working for sentient beings without worrying how long it's going to take. Yeah. And also wisdom. Yeah, when they cultivate wisdom, understanding the true nature of things, that also gives them a different perspective, a different way of thinking, seeing things, and gives them great joy. Yeah, it said when they have the realization of the true nature of things, it's incredibly blissful. They're blissful all the time. So there's no more tiredness or boredom. So maybe at this, you know, from our point of view, it looks like hard work and maybe even impossible. How could that ever happen? But as you progress on the bodhisattva path, I think it does seem more doable, more possible, and not impossible. I don't know if that's helping your question or not.
Yeah, a little. I was just wondering also, like, that every being that is now living in an animal, so would all beings have to be in a human form to be able to get teachings and understand? So
Yeah. Yeah, because as animals, their minds aren't really capable of understanding and practicing, so they need to be in a better situation, like human life. So bodhisattvas, I mean, it's said that they go to the different realms and help the beings in those realms, help them to get out of these unfortunate realms and into more fortunate realms where they can understand the Dharma and practice it. So that is like a first step, is to get them out of the 3 unfortunate realms into more fortunate ones so that they can practice.
Lama Zopa was also busy with this kind of thing, to make connections with people, with animals, and bring them to a better life. Especially in some film as the Tibet travel.
What was the thing about Tibet?
There was a video made of his travel in Tibet.
Ah, okay. I didn't see that, but
Lost
yeah.
World.
Often, yeah, whenever there were animals around, she would, arrange for something beneficial for them, like saying prayers, mantras, taking them around stupas. I heard one story where he was in a place where there were some animals in a field like horses and cows, and he got the people to set up like loudspeakers. Yeah, loudspeakers next to this field, and then he was, reciting mantras so that this, the sound of the mantras would reach all of these animals. So yeah, really doing a lot to help animals, and also hungry ghosts and spirits. There's practices for helping those. Blessing water or flower and then offering it to them, to the spirits. So he was really into doing things like that.
Maybe as a follow-up questions on joy in practice, in the practice, if you may share some thoughts on the finding the balance between being content with the skills, the capacity we have in being helpful for others, but also nudging ourselves further, and sometimes can be like, I'm not able to do as much as I would like to, but finding this, I would say, a balance at least.
A balance, yeah, that's really important. Often when us Western people, when we first start to learn meditation and the Dharma, we get really enthusiastic and, start spending a lot of time every day doing meditation and prayers and practices and study, and then we sometimes overdo it and burn out. We get burned out from doing too much, and then sometimes people even stop practicing for a while because they get so tired. So it is recommended that we try to practice in a balanced way rather than putting in a lot of energy, burning out, and then not doing anything. So they say it's good to do a certain amount of practice every day and just keep going, keep practicing, according to your ability, according to your... Well, there's different factors like how much time you have, and also if you have other commitments, if you have family you need to take care of, a job you need to do, and so on. So considering those things and making sure that you don't neglect your family, your job, and so on. Paying your bills. So we need to kind of consider our individual situation and needs and so on, and then sort of figure, well, how much time can I spend doing practice each day, and then try to practice in a consistent way, meaning like, it's better to do just a little bit every day, or whatever you're able to do every day, rather than a whole lot and then not at all. So they have this analogy of I really like it. They say that it's good to practice in the way that an elephant walks. So an elephant walks slowly but in a steady way and is able to go for a long time with a steady pace. So it's better to be like that rather than like a rabbit who runs really fast in one direction and then stops, and then runs really fast in another direction and stops, and doesn't really get anywhere. So they say we shouldn't be like that. We should be like the elephant. Just keep going steadily every day, practicing, and eventually we will, get results of our practice. So I like that. I find that analogy nice. And also another thing that's really important is to try to avoid having expectations. Lama Yeshe used to say that to us. He said, when you meditate, don't have any expectations, which is actually hard to do, because I think our mind naturally wants some results from our practice. We put time and energy into practice, and we kind of want to experience something, some result. That's just like everything we do in our life. We're always aiming for some result. And I've heard this same advice from other meditation teachers in other traditions, so it seems like pretty common. So if we have expectations, like if we're, another problem is, we sometimes hear stories or read stories about people who get experiences, who have these fantastic experiences from meditation, feeling bliss, feeling like out of the body, and some kind of realization. So we hear about these experiences, and then we want them to. I want that to happen to me. And so this is really counterproductive, because if we're sitting there doing meditation, hoping that we'll have that experience, then our mind is caught up with grasping, attachment, and our motivation isn't probably the right motivation. I want that experience because it will feel good, and then I can tell my friends about it. I can go on social media and tell everybody what I experienced in meditation. So there's probably a lot of ego involved. And having that kind of attitude is actually creating an obstacle, putting up a block to having any kind of good result from our meditation practice. So we're actually creating obstacles for ourselves, because there are experiences that can happen in meditation. There's fantastic things that can happen in our mind through practicing meditation. But if we're grasping at those experiences with greed, with this sort of egotistical attachment, then they're not going to happen. Yeah. So that's actually creating an obstacle to having those experiences. So we have to be able to just let go of any such attitude and just meditate, ideally with the right motivation, because we want to develop our good qualities and benefit others and so on and so forth. So always try to have the right motivation, the good motivation for meditating, and just try to forget about what you've heard from other people, and grasping at having those experiences yourself. So that's something else to look out for, to be careful of and avoid. And then even if you do have some fantastic experience, it might happen, it's also important to not grasp at that, not be attached to that. Because that's not the point of practicing meditation. The point is not to have these fantastic experiences. The point is to develop our mind, develop our good qualities, and aim for these higher states of mind, like nirvana and enlightenment. And so they say that these nice experiences or fantastic experiences are more like a side effect of meditation. It's not the real purpose of practicing meditation. They're a side effect. And in themselves, they may not be particularly useful. One of the first Americans to start learning meditation, Buddhist meditation, is Joseph Goldstein, who started back in the 60s, I think. He was in the Peace Corps, and I don't know. Anyway, he started quite early to practice meditation, and has written a number of books. He's kind of a leading figure in contemporary Buddhism. And I was listening to some talks that he gave, and he talked about a time when he was in Burma doing a lot of meditation practice, the Vipassana insight kind of practice, under the guidance of a teacher. And, or maybe it was India. Anyway, it was somewhere in Asia. He was doing a lot of meditation. And he got to the point where every time he meditated, he felt like his body just dissolved into blissful light. Something like that, which is like a really blissful, wonderful experience. And then he had to leave and go back to America to take care of some business. And then eventually went back to India and again started doing meditation. And he expected to have the same experience that he had before. But instead of that, he said every time he meditated, his body felt like a painful mass of twisted steel. Those were his words. It was very unpleasant. And he was kind of like, wait, what's happening? You know, like, this shouldn't be happening. And he said he spent 2 years trying to get back to that previous experience that he'd had of this blissful light, and it didn't happen. And he finally realized that wasn't the point. The point of meditation is not to get back to some great experience that you had before. The point of meditation is to deal with what's happening in the present. So he learned that lesson from that experience. But that just shows how, yeah, even if we have some pleasant experience, if we get attached to it and then expect that it will keep happening again and again and again, that's also missing the point. That isn't the point of practice. And so I think, yeah, realistically it seems like practice goes up and down in the sense that maybe sometimes you have nice experiences, other times you have painful experiences. And this is just natural. As we are progressing on the path to enlightenment, we have our karma and our afflictions that are still there. They haven't been completely eliminated, and they will sometimes ripen. And so we'll have problems and difficulties. This is just normal. And there's actually a whole body of teachings and practices in our tradition, which is called transforming adverse circumstances into the path. And the idea is that whenever you encounter a problem, any kind of problem you experience, it doesn't have to get you down. It doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can be used in the path. You can use that situation to practice and learn and grow. Okay, so like taking problems into the path for your spiritual growth, spiritual development. So instead of seeing problems or unpleasant experiences as, oh, I don't want this, go away, leave me alone. They say bodhisattvas actually welcome problems because they know that they're useful for their spiritual growth. And there's a book, if you're interested in this topic, Lama Zopa Rinpoche. I don't know if is it in Dutch? It's also, yeah. What's the name?
Transforming problems?
Yeah, in Dutch. Yeah, transforming problems into the path.
Problemen oplossen? Ja, okay.
Yeah, that's wonderful, wonderful teachings. Very helpful because, yeah, the path isn't easy. It's not always going to be, things aren't always going to go our way, the way we want them to. And so it's good to know how to deal with problems and difficulties so they don't get us down.
Are there people online that have questions?
Yes.
Okay, anybody else has a question?
I have a question about the distinction between the second and third scope. in the Lamrim. So this morning I think it's about the difference between Mahayana and Theravadin. And what I understood is that in the Theravadin context you refer to nirvana, while for Mahayana you refer to complete Buddhahood. Could you explain those differences? Because I'm a bit lost there.
Well, yeah, so what I said this morning was that in the Theravada tradition, the goal that, I mean, this is in a general way, but the goal is to attain nirvana, which means liberating oneself from samsara, from the whole cycle of death and rebirth. And so, yeah, the practices that one does, everything one does is for that goal, just getting out of samsara. And not, generally, for the most part, they're not thinking of helping everybody else. Of course, they have compassion. You develop compassion and love and help others as much as you can, but you're not thinking like the bodhisattva of, the way the bodhisattva thinks of, I'm going to help all living beings get out of samsara. I'm going to keep working for others and keep working until they're all free of samsara. That's not their goal. As far as I know, they are aware of the Mahayana path. They are aware of the bodhisattva path because that was the path the Buddha followed. So they know that the Buddha himself, before being a Buddha, was a bodhisattva. And he spent many, many lifetimes on the bodhisattva path and then finally became a Buddha, fully enlightened Buddha. But as far as I understand, I got this from speaking with someone in that tradition, they don't see that it's necessary for everyone else to become a Buddha. And the Buddha himself taught this path to nirvana. Like in the early scriptures, the Theravada scriptures, this is what the Buddha taught, how to get to nirvana, how to get out of samsara. And many of his disciples attained that. They attained the state of arhat. So an arhat is someone who has freed themselves from samsara and the whole cycle of. So many of his disciples attain that, and that's the goal in that tradition, is becoming an arhat. So that's generally speaking, although I did know a monk from Sri Lanka, a teacher from Sri Lanka, who said that in Sri Lanka, generally that's a Theravada country, there are some monks who take the bodhisattva vow, and their goal, they choose, to follow the bodhisattva path for enlightenment. So even though they're in a Theravada country, they're wearing the robes of a Theravada monk, but their goal is the Mahayana goal of attaining full enlightenment. So, does that make sense?
Yes, it does. But I find it hard to believe that if a Theravadin practitioner reaches enlightenment, that he doesn't want others to follow. That's kind of, Well,
yeah. It's not. I don't think it's that they don't want others to follow, but they don't take on that responsibility that I am going to make sure everybody else follows. It's like you take this responsibility to help everybody else. And I haven't really studied that much of the Theravada tradition, but there are some in the Theravada tradition who believe that once you have attained either nirvana, your own liberation, or Buddhahood, full enlightenment, if you have attained those goals, then when you pass away, your life comes to an end, then your mind also comes to an end. Your mind ceases to exist, and so that means there's nothing left of you to continue helping others. In the Mahayana tradition, we don't believe that. We say that, no, the mind never goes out of existence. The mind of an arhat, the mind of a Buddha, they don't go out of existence, they continue existing. And so we believe that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas continuously are around, available, working to help sentient beings. So that might have some effect on this, yeah. Because if you're aiming for the state of arhat, the state of nirvana, and you believe my mind is going to go out of existence when my life ends, then it wouldn't really make sense to think I'm going to work to help all other beings reach enlightenment. That was just impossible. Does that make sense? So
Yes,
not everyone believes that, apparently. There's debate about this, and some wouldn't agree with that. But yeah, I think they think that they do acknowledge the existence of bodhisattvas, but they think that it isn't necessary for everybody. There's enough, as long as there's a few bodhisattvas, a few Buddhas and bodhisattvas helping everybody else, that's good enough. It's not necessary for all of us to do that. So I think that may be one way of thinking.
Be more a curiosity about prayers, because first time I learned the prayers was through Sravasti Abbey, that has a certain chanting. And this weekend, for the first time, I learned the chanting we use this weekend. I was curious, what is the background, if there's a tradition where the different ways to chant prayers come from?
Well, the Tibetans, in Tibetan, prayers are usually in metered verse, like each line has a certain number of syllables, so they can be easily chanted. And so if you go to a Tibetan monastery or Tibetan temple, they're always chanting their prayers, and often very nice melodies. But then, when we translate those prayers into English or Dutch or whatever, it's really difficult to get chantable version of the prayers, unless you chop out a bunch of syllables, and then it doesn't make any sense. And so there have been attempts over the years. Different people have tried to make chantable English prayers, and some may not work very well. Some do work. So at Sravasti Abbey, there are several members of the community who have background in music and also theater arts, performing arts. They've been singers and so on. And so they kind of worked out ways of chanting the prayers, putting the prayers into a chantable English with a nice kind of tune. So yeah, that's how that developed. And I don't know, was this something you just invented, or?
Yeah, I'm actually happy you asked, because there's no authentic lineage I use. So actually, I sort of started singing what I felt was, practical, because this is from FPMT prayer book, and then normally it's done in the Tibetan. And I sort of copied, I guess, the tunes of the Tibetan for this, and you could notice for some it's not so fitting, like the mandala, but it was more to do something chantable in English this weekend, but there's no lineage, I would say, so. Please, but please, my own oral transmission, but this sort of, I made it up basically, so. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a challenging situation. That's as much as I know. There's one translator, Martin Wilson, English man, and he made some chantable versions of prayers. Some people might use those, but they don't seem to be very well known or popular. What I find, having been living at the Abbey now for a while, I really like the chantable ones. For one thing, it makes it easier to learn them by heart. Yeah, when you're chanting it, then without making effort, you know it very easily, and you can memorize it, and then you can chant from memory. And it's very energetic as well, a lot of energy. So I really like that. But because it's a different center than here, then I didn't want to, impose a different tradition. And some places they do all their chants in Tibetan, but there you have beautiful melodies. But then if you don't know Tibetan, you're chanting you're making all these sounds that you don't understand what they mean, unless if you have the English translation underneath, so you can read that while you're chanting. But that can be a little awkward. So we haven't really come up with a ideal solution to that situation, that problem. Okay, so I think we can stop there, and I hope that we'll do some final dedication of our merit from this weekend. I do hope that this has been helpful for you. We didn't manage to go through every part of the Lamrim, but that would have been impossible anyway in just 1.5 days, 2 days. But I do hope that you have learned something helpful, and you will continue your study of the Lamrim, your practice of the Lamrim, and just do as much as you can in that area, in a reasonable way, not sort of pushing yourself, expecting that you're going to get all these realizations in this lifetime. But the teachers always say, even if we familiarize our minds with the Lamrim, with these teachings and practices, then imprints are left on our mind that will still be there in future lives. We'll be able to meet these teachings again in the future, and again practice them, and just continue our journey towards enlightenment. So it's good that if we, as we're dedicating our merit, that we keep that in mind and include that in our dedication, that we will continue meeting these teachings, the teachings of the Buddha that show how to become free of suffering, how to find genuine happiness, how to reach awakening. We will continue to meet these teachings life after life after life, and continue going in that direction of enlightenment, and that we will help others as much as we can along the way.